is a universal emotion that we all have as human beings, but it could also be one of the most judged and uncomfortable and even destructive emotions that we experience. In this video, we're going to talk about what anger is from a nervous system standpoint, how to create the conditions to release negative emotion, as well as specific somatic exercises that you can do when you're experiencing anger. What's up, everyone? My name is Lizzie. I am the creator of Empower Body, Mind, Soul, ritual fitness, and somatic self-care for paradigm shifting women. Anger is one of the most judged emotions, especially for women. We're supposed to be cute and prim and proper and pleasing to everybody. So being angry, isn't cute, right? We will get called a bitch for sure if we're angry. But it's so important that we unwind some of that cultural programming to really just understand what anger is so that we can release the shame and effectively meet ourselves in that emotion and to help ourselves release it. Nobody likes being angry. Nobody wants to be angry. It usually feels like shit to be angry, especially when we're angry at somebody that we love. But this is a universal emotion that we all have. Anger is a direct experience that happens by having our boundaries crossed. Let that sink in, okay? We are angry because our boundaries are crossed. We may even be angry at ourselves because we crossed our own boundaries. But let's look at it through that lens so that we can release some of the self-judgment. It sucks when we flip out and are angry at our kids, right? Nobody likes that. But we have to understand that it's because we had a boundary. Our kid may not have known about that boundary. We may not have even been clear about that boundary. But make no mistake, that anger showed up because a boundary was crossed. Okay, so it's important that we release the shame and we understand that, and that we get connected to the subtle cues of our body, because our body is giving us information around where our boundary is. So when we get angry, we can simply take that information, receive it. Okay, good to know. I'm angry because my boundary was crossed. I had a boundary there. We didn't feel respected or honored or considered in that situation. And so we got angry. It is so important for us to know this so that we're not just confused about why we're angry, that we can actually learn from our anger. And then in the future, we can do better about communicating our boundaries to the people that we love so that we get angry less. Okay, this is part of the work that we do inside the online studio. It's really important that we understand that anger is a sympathetic activation. Our nervous system is designed to keep us safe. It's really only concerned with that one basic function. This primal part of us is scanning our environment perpetually, trying to figure out if we're safe or if we're in danger, and if we need to click into gear. Okay, anger is an expression of the sympathetic nervous system, AKA fight or flight. So when our nervous system perceives us to not be safe, right, when there is a threat, in this case of anger, when a boundary is being crossed, that system is going to kick on to protect us. The sympathetic system is the first line of defense when a perceived or real threat comes into our awareness that's greater than our capacity to cope with, okay? If it's beyond our capacity to talk through or whatever, we're gonna click into that sympathetic activation and our body is gonna get ready to fight or flight. In this case, fight. So what is happening? Our heat turns up, our heart starts to beat fast, our blood pressure kicks on, blood is pumped out to the extremities. All we really can focus on is that danger, that threat, that boundary being crossed. And we have an intense activation, a charge inside our body that flushes through our system. all of this happens so fast that it can be hard to even track it, right? The more connected we get to our body through daily somatic practices, the more we can start to identify these subtle cues. We don't just get angry. No, we start to get a little agitated, annoyed, frustrated, resentful, right? There's subtler cues within our system before that big activation of anger. And the more connected we are to our body through daily practices, the easier it is to identify those subtle cues, as well as to identify what are the things that usually trigger that for me. I know for myself that if I'm trying to do two things at once, I'm more prone to clicking into anger, annoyance, and frustration and snapping at my kid. Specifically, scheduling is one of my triggers. So the other day I noticed it. I was looking at my phone and looking at my schedule, and then she was starting to talk to me and request my attention. And I could feel my system kind of agitated and overwhelmed and just about be snappy, right? But I could notice that. I'm trying to focus on this while this stimulus from her is coming in, and that's kind of, short-circuiting my fuse. So I was like, you know what? Stop doing what I'm doing for a second. What did you say? Okay, let me focus on her first and then come back to my schedule. If I try to do those at the same time, right? Okay, I know this about myself. And I'm in my body enough that I could sense those little cues leading up to a, snap before it happens. Okay, so that's super important, so that we start to identify these cues before they are full-blown aggressive expressions, right? Because it never feels good, right? If we flip out on someone, we're always gonna feel a sense of shame and regret afterwards. Looking at it from a nervous system perspective is so helpful, so that we can just be like, oh, I'm having a sympathetic activation. I feel like there's danger here at some level. We can be compassionate with ourselves. Right in that moment, we need a little less stimulus and more safety, okay? So this could look like removing ourselves from that stimulus, maybe going into the bathroom and shutting the door, right? Gaining a little bit of space and a little bit of perspective from that trigger, from that threat, right? I say it like this, threat, because our toddler, for example, isn't necessarily going to harm us, although our nervous system is taking in that tantrum, for example, as crossing our boundary and as an actual threat to us. So when we can look at it this way, we're like, oh, it's my animal nervous system. It's beyond its capacity. It needs to breathe a little bit. It needs a little bit of space, and it needs safety. The more we shame ourselves for being overwhelmed or angry, the less safe that we're gonna feel. So creating the conditions for us to process this anger requires safety and non-judgment. So we release the shame, we're compassionate with ourselves. Even if we did just get snappy, like we can say, I'm sorry, I just snapped at you. I'm gonna go take care of myself for a few minutes, okay? Immediately, that apology, that self-acknowledgement is already gonna help diffuse and release some of that shame and guilt. And then in our own space, we get to practice not doubling down and making ourselves wrong for what we're experiencing. So first and foremost, we want to say to ourselves, it's okay that you're angry right now. Come here, let me hold you. I've got you. This is a safe space. And acknowledging there is reason why we got angry. It's not just because we're bad or we're crazy. No, right? That is the exact cultural paradigm that we are transforming together. We are not crazy. We are not bad. It is natural for us to be angry when we are disrespected, dishonored, and our boundaries are being crossed. So validate your experience. It makes sense that you're angry right now. How revolutionary. Wouldn't we love to hear that from our partner, right? If we're angry about something, we're not angry for no reason. When that is validated, we start to release that shame, release that judgment, and release the need to keep fighting or defending our stance or our anger. That safety and that validation is so critical. Once we create that container, we may then connect down to Mother Earth, call on our support system from the unseen realms, maybe our angels, our ancestors, our God, our source, maybe just connecting to the energy of the sun. We want to remember that there is safety and support and resource here for us. Co-regulating with spirit, with earth, maybe even with a pet, can be so powerful to help us have a little dose of safety. Because we're tribal beings, connection is so key, and belonging is so key to us feeling safe. And it's triggering, right? Especially if we're angry at people within our tribe, within our family. Going away from those people can feel alone, and that can trigger our lack of safety, our anxiety, and nervous system dysregulation. A pet is so powerful, right? Because it's really easy to feel unconditional love with our pets most of the time. We also may get angry at them occasionally too. Let's be real. So connecting to that steady support of the earth, to that steady, unwavering support of God, of spirit, these are secure attachments and connections that we have through every moment of our life. Even if our best friend or our doggy or a kitty cat isn't available, we have those connections that we can draw on. So creating safety. Maybe we do close that bathroom door and then we feel into our connection to the earth. We maybe say a little prayer, calling in the energy and support of spirit. We create that little container of safety. We release that shame. We validate our experience. Now we can work with that anger. Anger is a sympathetic charge. Just like I shared in the last video about anxiety, which is deeply connected to anger because it is also a sympathetic charge, we want to allow ourselves to pendulate and match that frequency of anger before we try to calm ourselves down, right? We're not just gaslighting ourselves and just let it go. I mean, who wants to hear that when they're angry? You're overreacting, just let it go. No, we don't want to be responded to like that. So we're not going to do that to ourselves. We're not going to gaslight and invalidate ourselves. We are healing that sort of narcissistic abuse, right? We are rewiring ourselves for a secure attachment with ourselves first and foremost. So we're going to match that frequency. We're going to allow it to ring through our body. And then we're going to pendulate back and forth between that upregulation and that downregulation into the parasympathetic state of rest and digest, peace and calm and groundedness. So pendulating into that sympathetic charge with anger could look like pushing as hard as we can into a wall. This is so powerful. You can really feel your entire musculature activate. Push as hard as you can. Let out some sound maybe. A scream could feel really good, or it could be extremely tiring. So you could let out almost like a silent scream. Something like that, okay? Another thing that you could do is take a pillow and slam a pillow against a bed or something like that. Okay, letting this charge come through your body. When we don't release that cortisol, when we just tap it down and try to act like I'm fine, I'm not angry, right? We try to override it. That gets pushed down into fawning, into freezing, and into stuck energy that creates long-term chronic pain, chronic illness, and chronic autoimmune conditions. We don't want that. We don't need that, right? So the more we can release the shame and the more we can let this energy move through our body, the easier it is going to be to release that cortisol pump and to then be free to go about our lives without that stored stress and cortisol that ends up being trauma. So we want to let ourselves feel into that sympathetic charge. It could be pushing against the wall. It could be slamming a pillow. It could be punching. I punch with my clients. It's really important that we embody the full range of our nervous system capacity. We don't want to just be calm all the time. That isn't the goal. We aren't going to actually feel safe if we can't defend ourselves, if we can't stand up for ourselves, if we can't actually advocate for ourselves to get our needs met. We're going to actually feel safer and more calm at rest if we own the capacity to actually be a fighter and be a predator. We're at the top of our food chain. We are predators, not just prey. And so we want to be embodied in this capacity to fight. It's not necessarily bad to fight. We want to inhabit this capacity. I often tell the story about I was in the woods one time by myself, processing a deep anger and resentment towards the masculine. I was feeling abandoned, I was feeling angry, and I had this rage inside of me that was like, this is bigger than me. Like, this is my lineage. This is like belongs to my mom and her mom and my ancestors. And so there was an axe there and there was a tree stump. It was already cut down. And I just let myself rage and chop into that wood and release that charge. And then I would alternate into that child's pose, hands on the earth, and then naturally a bunch of tears would pour out. And I would let those tears come, and if I could feel that charge again, I got up and I axed again, let some sounds out, let myself actually vibrate and move that frequency of the anger and rage that I was feeling. I believe that I did deep, deep, deep work there over my entire lineage in that practice. Know that, okay? This isn't something to be embarrassed about. This is something to be proud of. This is work that we are doing to release generational trauma through our bodies, through our cells, through our DNA. The more we do this, the less our kids are going to have to do it. This is something that we should actually embrace and honor and be proud of within ourselves. So we're going to let ourselves feel that rage, feel that anger. We're going to use some of our tools like pushing, stomping, punching, slamming. I like to put on some music that helps me go there. We're going to let ourselves go there, and then we're going to down-regulate. That could be a child's pose. Remember, when we are down-regulating, we want to take a slow inhale, and then an exhale. An exhale that's extended. Maybe vibrating a tone, accessing that vagus nerve, which is the central component to our nervous system, to help that down regulation. Anytime we fold forward, we're going to slow down the breath, we're going to slow down the heart rate, we're going to invite ourselves to ground and to enter into that parasympathetic rest and digest state. So we're going to maybe alternate between those poses, that activating pose and that down-regulating pose, a few times until possibly maybe we have a release. Maybe we have some tears, some sounds, some shakes that arise. And more than anything, we want to trust the wisdom of our body and how it chooses to release. These instructions can only get us so far. They are helping you tap in and access that more primal, intuitive, organic wisdom that your body, and only your body, really holds, right? Your body knows how to do this. We are just simply helping our body come back to that, tap into that innate impulse, okay? So follow the threads of your inner wisdom. You may choose to go into a different pose or try something else, but keep in mind this principle of pendulation and letting yourself go there into the anger before you try to take it down. You also may want to come onto all fours. If you're outside, you could even kind of like dig a hole and stick out your tongue and let that energy move out of your mouth, almost like you're vomiting a release, right? Some cat-cow poses, releasing on the exhale. We may squeeze into that anger and then release it down. We may shake and punch and then lay down onto the earth, maybe even onto our belly, because there's such a surrender there. And we're giving it back to the earth, remembering that the earth has this incredible power to compost our scraps and turn them into nourishment. Let me know how this goes for you. And thank you for doing this work. Thank you for being someone who is here healing generational trauma and freeing yourself to be a conscious creator on this planet. We are healing our relationships and we are healing our world through this work. So thank you. Stay tuned because we're going to be talking about how to release grief and sadness in the next video. Much love.